I would love to get to know you a little bit, Abhi. Where does Abhi come from? What is your story? What have you done? And how did you end up at Gatsby where you are now?
Thanks. I guess that's an interesting story. So I'm from Los Angeles, California. Born and raised here in California. I actually went to college at UC San Diego, and I did not study computer science. I studied mathematics and economics. So I was not destined to be an engineer from the get-go. After college, I had two options. I had either had to go home and live with my parents or continue my young bachelor life in San Diego. So I hustled the last week of school to find any job that I could just use to cover rent and just stay in San Diego. I found a job at a startup in the finance department. So that's where I there's this company called Mogul. It was like a restaurant rewards program. You could like link up your Visa debit card and you go to these restaurants, and anytime you swiped, you got like cash back for eating there. And so I didn't know any of the technical bits at the time. I was like, what the heck is this stuff? But I was just doing their finances, like raises, got exposed to the startup culture from the finance perspective. And one of my best friends I met there, and I had asked him like, hey, like this engineering thing sounds cool. The products look really cool. Like, how do I get involved with something like this? Like, do I need a CS degree? And he was like, no, I studied art in college. I just, became an iOS developer because I was interested in technology. I self-taught myself years ago. And I was like, dang, dude, you studied art and you got this far? Like, he was like a principal engineer. He was like an older gentleman. And so I was really inspired. I really wanted to become a software engineer. So I started studying like JavaScript, HTML, CSS. And back then, this was like 2013.
At this point, you had never done any coding. You'd done your economics degree, your maths degree. You had never done any coding, but you were like, this sounds cool. I want to do that.
Pretty much. Like the only coding I'd ever done is like MATLAB, which is like a statistics program. And even then I was just copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. But I didn't even know it was Stack Overflow. I just thought it was like that website that had all the answers, So like I was just so ignorant to everything, And I didn't even know about VCs or like how startups got their money. I just wanted to like be part of building some cool product that users wanted to use. And so I didn't have any experience. I just bought a bunch of books, and there were a lot of cool resources like Code Academy and just things like that. I always tell people, like, it's who you know a lot of the times. Like, I got a lot of opportunities because of that. Because my friend was a CTO in downtown San Diego, and he said, hey, I'll hire you tomorrow. You just have to quit your job today and come work for $9 an hour. And I was like, isn't that like lower than minimum wage? And he's like, yeah, but you have no leverage in this situation. You come, you learn how to work in this environment. We'll pay you $9 an hour because that's enough. That's exactly the amount you need to cover your rent and buy groceries, and you come tomorrow and there it goes. And I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And I actually did quit my job literally that day. I quit my job, and the next day I started as a software engineer, and my friend had lied to this boss. He lied to the CEO and said, yeah, my friend has tons of experience. I'm just going to hire him on the spot. I had zero experience. So every day in that company, I felt like I was going to get fired every day.
That's incredible.
I'd go home every night at like 6 p.m. and I'd study 6 p.m. to 3 a.m., get a little bit of sleep, because I had the biggest imposter syndrome that people were going to find out I was a fraud, that I didn't know anything, And so you start like watching YouTube and looking on Twitter, and, you can like meet people and stuff. And so I started getting better. I like went on LinkedIn. I asked like random people who had like more than 4 years of experience. I like cold messaged them back in the day when you could on LinkedIn. You can just send people messages and say, hey, you want to be my mentor? Like, I'm a budding engineer. We love code reviews, etc. And I got a bunch of crickets for many weeks, except this one guy hit me back up. He worked at like Blue Shield in like Atlanta, Georgia. Some random guy I never met in my life. And he was like, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. So we started doing these like Google Hangouts on Thursdays, and he was just teaching me code reviewing, things I wasn't getting at my job because like, I couldn't like ask dumb questions like that. Right. And so he, was getting better. He started telling me my code looks better than his own coworkers. I felt good, and fast forward a little bit, like the friend from Mogul, he went to LA to join a startup called WorkPop. It was like an HR platform. And once again, it's who you know. I hit him up like, hey, like, I'm ready to get out of San Diego and do something else. And he was like, yeah, come for an interview. It was like the hardest interview ever. They like do like the old school, like, whiteboard type interviews. I probably failed it, but I guess my personality was good. And I worked at WorkPop for about 5 years. We got acquired. Yeah, I became a senior engineer there, became a principal there. I learned everything, front end, back end, infrastructure. I like people from like LinkedIn, and we hired people from eBay and people who worked on like MongoDB when it first was created. Just like all these different people in your life, right? That just teach you things, right? And so I stepped out. Once we got acquired, we got bought by a big ass company, and it was really boring. They didn't even give me a computer for 2 weeks. When I was working there, I didn't have a computer, so I knew that this was not for me. And then Gatsby was on Twitter. I was like just tweeting about some stuff, and I got contacted, and the rest is history. Then I joined Gatsby like 3 years ago. So I've been at Gatsby for a while too. So I guess that's like a 9-year career span right there. Boom. But it's crazy how it started, and sorry that's such a long story, but that's my story.
No, that's fascinating, man. What a way to get kicked in the butt that you join a company without even knowing how to code, and your friend completely oversold you. Like, that must be so much pressure on your shoulders for such a long time. Like, I can't imagine the fire that must have lit on your butt, because you were like, holy cow, I do not know what I'm doing. Like, that sounds scary as hell to me.
Well, at first it was a fire. I used to call my mom every day, like, I'm totally going to get fired today. And then the fire became like a chip on my shoulder, because you start getting good at something. And you realize that you're better than other people at it sometimes. And then you're like, well, I don't have a degree in this CS stuff, so I don't get the nice bonus packages or entry salary as high as others, you know? And that gives you a chip. And then you like start being an asshole sometimes. And then hopefully once you hit this level of maturity, when you're okay with your career and how you got here, the chip goes away and people just respect you for your experience. Not about your degrees or where you came from. No one cares that I went to college at UC San Diego anymore. They just know that I'm good at what I do, right? And I care about it. So if anyone listening has gone through that experience and has a chip right now, it'll go away. Trust, it'll go away eventually.
I absolutely agree. For context, I worked with Abhi at Gatsby for a little bit while I was there. I had no idea about any of this. I am learning all of this today. Right, I just knew Abhi as a really technically talented coworker, and I'm excited to do the podcast with him now. But I did not know any of this, right? And it's the same for me, right? I didn't study, and people sometimes are surprised when I tell them that. But really, nowadays it doesn't matter if you're good at what you do. Where you learned it, how does that matter, right? As long as you're good at engineering, which is difficult to learn, admittedly, right? And it takes time, and you definitely have to put in the effort, like Abhi did. But if you're good at engineering, what does it matter which college you went to, or if you even went to college at all, or what you studied, right? That doesn't matter. Like, you're good at your job. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how old you are too. I mean, in your case, like writing the libraries that you did at such a young age, it just shows that you're interested in something and you had the time to devote to it, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was like intrinsically hard or you're so smart. And I'm not saying you're not smart, right? It's just the grit and effort there that you put in. And that's why you're such a prolific contributor in open source and your libraries, etc., is because regardless if you were working at a company or not, you still care about the ecosystem, still care about the topics that we work on. You know, you don't have to get paid to care about those things. And I think that separates people who went to school for this and maybe, you know, they did it because they followed a trend, or they kind of fell into it and they actually love it. And, you know, there's a difference between I think the caliber of those engineers out there.